have not had the opportunity to visit Russia for whatever reason. I believe that Russia is a hub for technologies, especially as it pertains to the needs of the global digital majority. And I'll break that down in a bit. But allow me to encourage those who have not yet been to Russia to please go and book that ticket, because if there is one country that actually can teach the world about resilience and about business as usual. People say, for example, Russians don't smile, right? And I say,
we smile.
They just don't smile.
This is very
Anyway.
Russian city, one of the most deep Russision cities. So you visited the right place.
Yes, and one of the most beautiful cities, towns.
It is, right? It is. It's Bolshoi Spasiba, Anna, Yuri, Я люблю тебя, Москва.
Zvezda Holding presents Dynamic Spectrum Talks now.
Hello, dear friends. Welcome to the Dynamic Spectrum Talks podcast, where we talk with interesting people from all over the world, exploring common ground between people, different countries and cultures. And our goal is to understand each other better and break down artificially created barriers. I'm Anna Shafran, and this is my colleague Yuri Lendra.
Hello, everyone.
And today we are joined via video call by Christina Amor-Maclang, Secretary General and co-founder of the International Digital Economies Association. Christina, welcome.
Very happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Good morning, Moscow.
Hello, Christine. And the first question we would like to ask, what is idea for idea? Let me clarify. Internet, which many believe knows everything, says that International Digital Economies Association, IDEA, is a consortium of cross-border digital ecosystem builders who all share the common aim of creating movements and enhancing the digital economies of the global majority. For us, it sounds quite impressive. Which countries are part of it, part of this initiative, and what does your association exactly do? And what key ideas does it promote?
So, the International Digital Economies Association, which, by the way, just celebrated its first anniversary last January 2025, is an organization that's registered out of Hong Kong. And it gave rise as a response to this growing multipolar global dynamics. And we're very proud to say that we represent over 90 countries, which constitutes 80% of the world's population. You know, sometimes you hear global North countries refer to us as the global South, but it goes beyond geography because we have members and partners who are of the global North, but works very closely and interacts economically a lot with the global majority. So we do prefer the term global majority. Our most active partners are in the regions of South America, specifically out of Brazil. Africa, happily, is actually one of our most active and the biggest cohort for country partners with Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Ethiopia as some of the most important hubs. This coming May 2025, we will be in the Republic of Congo to meet and sign our partnership with the 12 or so Francophone speaking countries in Central Africa. This is especially important in the light of the fact that not a long time ago, a government officer in France said something to the effect that, African countries are not grateful enough for the support. And to us, this was quite a bit of a surprise, in this day and age, how sentiments like these can still continue. And we really look forward to strengthening our outreach in Africa. Now moving eastward, we have a strong network in South Asia from India, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, all the way to, of course, ASEAN, where we will be discussing later the current chairmanship of Malaysia, and also the incoming recent inclusion of Indonesia to the BRICS community. Then I'm very proud to say that we also have very strong work streams in Central Asia, specifically with the EAEU, right? And we work very closely with the government bodies there. So it's not about geography. It's about the voice of a multipolar world that all expects respect from each other. So there are all these growth centers that are all very active in saying, you know what, we will work at parity with each other. And so that's what IDEA is. Happy to talk about the programs in a bit. I'll pause in the meantime.
We know that you have visited Russia several times. What impressed you the most? In one of your interviews, Christina, you mentioned being surprised by the new technologies Russia is implementing in its domestic market. You also noted that these technologies could be successfully exported to ASEAN countries, much like India has been doing for years. What are these technologies and how could they be adopted in this region?
I'm very pleased to answer this because I would like specifically to address many of those, for whatever reason, have not had the opportunity to visit Russia for whatever reason. I believe that Russia is a hub for technologies, especially as it pertains to the needs of the global digital majority. And I'll break that down in a bit. But allow me to encourage those who have not yet been to Russia to please go and book that ticket, because if there is one country that actually can teach the world about resilience and about business as usual, regardless of what's happening globally, then I would have to say that Russia would be one of the countries that can teach us that. So yes, guys, it is business as usual. It is business as usual. Of course, there are certain issues, such as sanctions or with regards to certain industries, but it is not something that has stopped the world from engaging with the Federation and vice versa. So, and in terms of business support, I would have to say that I've gained so many friends since the first time and supporters since the first time that I first came to Russia in 2022. And every single time, regardless of who the invitation is coming from, it has just been warmth, support, and engagement. And I think before I move on to the technologies, on a very lighter note, people say, for example, Russians don't smile, right? And I say,
we smile.
They just don't smile. Listen, I have an explanation for that. They don't smile in the photos, and then they smile and laugh at you after the camera is off, right? So in real life, they do. And some of the warmest welcome and support that I've gotten for most of my business trips, and I've traveled to a good part of the world, has really been from Russia. So I thank you all for that. I consider many partners and many good friends in the region. As a matter of fact, I spent my holidays actually, both working and resting in Suzdal, which is really like such a picture perfect postcard for Christmas.
This is very
Anyway,
Russian city, one of the most deep Russian cities. So you visited the right place.
Yes, and one of the most beautiful cities, towns.
it is, right? It is. And that's the thing, it's really very hard to explain to someone who hasn't been here. And so the first thing I want to encourage people, especially those that are involved in digital economies and technology, is come and experience it for yourself. Now, speaking of technologies, in my most recent trip, I was hosted by the government of Tatarstan, right? And it really has been in the heels of the if it's BRICS chairmanship. I got the chance to interact with the leaders in the Ministry of Digital, and they are agile, young, aggressive, active. I met them in Malaysia in November, and in less than a month's time, we were together at the end of the year. I was actually in Tatarstan, and the super hardworking Ministry of Digital, led by Minister Irat Hairulin, they were working up to the last day. I think it was the 30th or the 31st of December. And we were all talking about how to experience and bring all of these technologies from Russia to the rest of the world. Now, although it was the holidays, I got the chance to meet with under 20 startups who all presented their interventions. And some of those that have really stood out are those related to food security and agriculture. I got to see an AI precision agri-tech company in Kazan. And that is something that we hope to be able to pilot within the year. We have a project in Nigeria related to precision and agri-tech. So we hope to be able to bring in those technologies. But, I'll tell you something that really stood out. Many people have talked about the valuation gap, right? The valuation gap, say, between American startups and also between, say, Russian startups, right? This should be a fun conversation. I'll tell you. So the running joke in Silicon Valley many years back is, and it's almost, it's not even a joke. A lot of it is probably truth or half truth, that the technologies are Russian, the marketing and the selling are American, right? And so I feel like this is something that we need to raise because I've experienced it firsthand. I met this engineer in Kazan who showed me an unmanned vehicle that can carry up to 1,000 kilos in weight. So imagine its implication for agriculture or for defense. So they built this robot, this automated robot, and then he said, Amor, by the way, aside from this, we also can embed, right, into any robot instructions and programming so that two or more robots can work together on the same task. Okay, so imagine the implication of what he said. He basically just said we can actually mobilize multiple robots to work towards a common task. And I said to him, do you realize the bigness of what you just said? Why didn't you present and start off with that, right? So imagine you can actually commandeer multiple robots at the same time, right? In essence, creating an army, creating a community, working towards the same task. Really, really mind-blowing. And he said, because, people like seeing moving things. And what this tells you is that many of the technologies many of the technologists don't really appreciate so much the impact of what it is that we can do, right? of what they can do for the rest of the world. A year and a half ago, I had the opportunity to visit Moscow, specifically the smart cities execution of the Moscow city government, which is actually a country unto itself. And that probably is the reason why I felt so safe in 2022, walking around the streets of Moscow, even way past midnight, right? So, point being, there are many technologies that are right now not just in vitro, but in vivo, being executed in Russia that can very easily be replicated to the rest of the world. And then, of course, there are the technologies I've seen in Skolkovo related to health tech and digitalized operating rooms, right, that are AI driven. All of these for remote areas with no medical support in countries like Indonesia or the Philippines, which are like 7,000 to 12,000 islands separated. These are the types of technologies that I feel could easily export out, right, to the global majority. So it's not just in digital identity, smart cities, health tech, and of course, payments, especially in terms of blockchain and crypto adoption. I'll pause for now.
Christine, you just said a lot interesting information about your trip to Kazan. But let me also ask you to expand your answer, because we know that you've been last year in Kazan, not just to see the innovations there, but also to attend BRICS summit when Russia was the host country for the BRICS last year. So what was your impressions about the summit itself and about the prospect of this bloc, I mean the prospect of the BRICS? How likely is that the countries from the Asia-Pacific region, for example, Malaysia, will join this union, this bloc in nearby future? What do you think about it?
So I think I had one of the most trips to the Federation during its BRICS chairmanship. And I'd like to do a special shout out to a woman leader, a Sherpa in the global digital economy, Miss Victoria Panova. And I first met her actually during the in South Africa during the handover of the chairmanship from South Africa to Russia. And it was really at that time when we started discussing what the impact and importance of the global majority is. So I would have to say that a lot of her writings and her insights were very instrumental in helping us shape our philosophy in what we do now. The importance, I was able to specifically take part during the Civil Society Summit in Moscow. But overall, in terms of the Russian chairmanship, I think this is probably the year when we had the most number of ASEAN participants, especially when it comes to the leaders during that year. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim of Malaysia was in Vladivostok during the Eastern Economic Forum. I also spoke in the Eastern Economic Forum, albeit virtually. There were absolutely no flights. So even if I wanted to go, I couldn't even. That tells you that the outreach and the demand to open up the trade routes to the Russian Far East, especially Vladivostok, it's ripe. I wish there will be more flights and more connectivity. And also, it was during this year that Indonesia, which is our largest economy in ASEAN, became a full-time member of BRICS. And I think this is a very strong signal to the rest of the world, coming from one of the original progenitors of BRICS, which is Russia, that the business leaning towards ASEAN and the Asia Pacific, that's where the business is going to be. So this is a very strong statement, a strong pivot. Many of the important technology companies from the Federation all are looking for an ASEAN strategy. And regardless of whether the doorway is Jakarta, Kuala Lumpur, or Manila, we welcome you in ASEAN, right? We all welcome you in ASEAN. Like I said, many of the technologies in Russia are much needed in this region.
So even China has, let's say, competitors in Russia. I mean, from the perspective of the competition, because we know that this region is close to China, and usually China tries to take as much influence as possible. But you see, there is a space for even Russian technologies to compete with the China and maybe with Singapore and with other local economical tigers.
The demand is so huge. So I think what we need to really focus on is baking a bigger pie. Before I even talk about competition, I would say at close to we're now pushing 800 million people. 800 million people in ASEAN. There is so much of ASEAN to go around, right? And there are technologies that are coming from China. There are technologies that will be coming from Russia. You have to look at ASEAN as 10 different regions. We are united in so many ways, but largely different. We are united in our diversity. We are united in our difference. Indonesia and the Philippines more or less are sort of the same. Primarily geographically, we're separated by islands, connectivity. We have a very young population. We're mobile first. We are net borrowers, right? So lending, credit, access to credit, SME-led interventions are something that we welcome very much. Singapore and Malaysia, on the other hand, are net creditors, right? So that's where the funding can emanate from. We have some technologies coming out of that region, but by and large, the ASEAN region are net importers of technology. I think what is important to note is that we should not be, as ASEAN, overly dependent on any one country. Whether it's the US, whether it's Russia, whether it's China, I think what's important is to give as many options as possible. If there's one thing that the Microsoft meltdown taught the world, is that we need to start diversifying where we get our technologies from. And in a way, that's great, right? Because it creates sort of a checks and balance. An enterprise, for example, can have a Microsoft supplier, and at the same time could bring in potentially InnoStage, for example, coming from Russia. And this is good at the end of the day for the company, because it creates some kind of check and balance for them, right? And I think that's the one thing that I hope everyone will take away, is diversify your technology sources as much as possible.
Christina, you've been advocating for the introduction of a new international currency and believe that an independent BRICS currency would be the ideal solution. Do you think this could become a reality in the near future? Many global South countries are now launching their own digital currencies. Just last year, Russia introduced the digital ruble. What does this trend indicate to your mind?
Of course. I think what we strive to do, what we are striving to do, is not to replace any one rail. It's actually create multiple rails that can complement legacy rails, right? So, for example, SWIFT will always be SWIFT. But I think it's important to create alternative rails that respond to the realities of the new digital economy. For example, the language of finance of the youth. And I would say that would be Africa and ASEAN, right? The two youngest regions in the world. The average age in ASEAN is around 24 years old. Our brothers and sisters in Africa, specifically in Nigeria, even younger. The average age is 19 years old. The financial language of this generation is primarily mobile and primarily crypto. They're very crypto savvy. And I cannot emphasize enough the importance of crypto. Why? Because this is the first time when you have a financial foundation that's coming from the ground up, right? Most of the usual financial establishments came from the top down. As insurance, for example, banking, all intended to preserve the status quo. However, in the case of crypto, these really came from nobodies. Maybe nobodies is not the right word, but the decentralized spirit of crypto means that the emergence of wealth and value, creation of value, can come from anywhere. Now, going back, congratulations on the beginnings of the digital ruble. Now what that really means is we can work towards an alternative payment rail and a payment mechanism that's on-chain. Now, being on-chain is very important, especially for us in the global majority, because the most number of crypto users around the world actually are from the global majority, specifically three countries. That would be Philippines, Vietnam, and Nigeria. All are very active members and partners of us in IDEA. I was recently in Lagos to extend our outreach and also to create opportunities, especially not just in fintech, blockchain, crypto, but also in agriculture. And I'll tell you something. This is exactly why we're working towards an alternative global majority-oriented payment gateway. I tried to transfer a modest amount, which was under $1,000 for purposes of tourism from Manila to Lagos. And I'll tell you, no bank would accept a transfer to Lagos. Can you imagine? No bank. And yet, despite that fact, you have an incredible economy. The payment system in Nigeria is in multiple quadrillion. Okay, this is according to one of the serial unicorns that I had the chance to speak to. And these are all internal payments. Can you imagine what the power of unlocking this behemoth of an economy that is Nigeria by connecting it to the rest of the global majority? You know that one of the biggest diasporas globally is the Nigerian diaspora, similar to the Philippine diaspora, meaning there's a Nigerian in any part of the world. There's a Filipino in any part of the world. So the remittance coming from all over the world, going back to Lagos, going back to Manila, is also in the multi-billion US dollars. And the best way to really transfer value, transfer remittance is via crypto. Because this actually presents, at least at this time, the least amount of friction. Now, everyone's been talking about the BRICS currency. I did a very extensive interview last year as BRICS ambassador, and it'll take time for governments to actually arrive at a united solution, especially if you're talking to multiple economies. But it should not, and it would not prevent the private sector partners and companies coming from the BRICS and non-BRICS region to all come together. Because I think if there is something that idea has shown, um, the mindset of the global South countries coming together is not exclusive to BRICS. It is a movement that has actually caught fire globally. This desire for a more multipolar world where all of us can stand side by side at parity with each other economically. Wow, I think it has caught fire around the world. And thankfully, it goes beyond just the concept of BRICS.
All right, Christine, we suggest to slightly shift our discussion because usually
Sure.
in the studio we discuss the similarities between people because our aim, as we already said in the beginning, is to promote connectivity between people and nations. And of course, you've been visited to Russia many times and you have a lot of impressions about our lifestyle. This is why I need to ask you, how many similarities did you find between your people and our people? Is there a lot of in common between the Russians and Malaysians? What do you think and what are your impressions?
Let me share with you what I've seen, the similarity of Russians with the rest of ASEAN. And also, let's start with Malaysia and Indonesia. Just last Monday, we ran a webinar on the Sharia digital economy, led by our chair in IDEA, Ibu Mahaning, from Indonesia. The business of ASEAN is the business of halal, and the business of halal is also the business of ASEAN. Close to 40% of our population is Muslim, led primarily by both Indonesia and Malaysia. And I want to immediately create the connectivity potentially with the region of Tatarstan, which is our hub, right? Which is our hub for Islamic digital economy in Russia. And of course, there are regions such as Dagestan that I think is also very prominently Muslim. So all of these digital economy work streams for Sharia and halal can then also connect with that of the Middle East, one of the historical partners of Russia. Now, I'm a big promoter of halal for all, even and especially for non-Muslims. And the reason for that is Islamic principles of finance resonate very well and are almost in parallel with sustainability, sustainable practices in finance and just sustainable practices in living. So that would be a good start. Now we can look at other regions like the Philippines, right? The second largest in terms of population in ASEAN. In terms of being very family oriented, right? So while we are not Orthodox, it comes from the same pillar, right? So Catholicism and Orthodox have very many similarities. And as a matter of fact, the iconography, the Mary iconography in Russia is something that is recognized actually in the Philippines. And we're so very family oriented. For those of you who have not been to Russia, Russians are tightly family oriented, where we continue to live and support Diet and Babushka as long as we can. And it is the same thing in the Philippines. So we are truly very family oriented. And I'll tell you something as well, going back to halal and Islam. In a way, even if Russia is not primarily Muslim, similar to Thailand, they're big promoters of the big halal economy. So Thailand only is 5% Muslim, and despite that, they're one of the biggest markets for halal economy, food products from all over the world. Just so many similarities, but the most important one, I think, is the orientation towards family, right? Being very family oriented. And it is no surprise that I find many Russian founders, and some of them, some of them are the biggest technologists and digital banking experts previously in Russia, have chosen to now make ASEAN as their home, whether it's Thailand, Indonesia, or the Philippines.
In addition to leading idea, Christina, you are also involved in various other international organizations. Could you name some of them? And you've also been recognized as one of the top 100 most influential women in the world, an achievement that's definitely worth discussing. Could you share more about that, please?
I think more than talking about me is how I'd like to talk about our femtech and our women advocacy in IDEA. So I'm very grateful for the support and the affirmation of other women leaders, and you especially, Anna. I think we'd love to have you be part of our women's sub-movement within IDEA. And the reason for this is we all need to work towards the day when we do not need to celebrate Women's Day anymore. Although I know, by the way, happy Man's Day to the men in Russia. See, I like that. There's Women's Day and there's also Men's Day. I think that's something that the rest of the world should teach, so can learn actually from Russia.
And there is also a Children's Day.
Day.
So the circle of life is connected. Men's Day, Women's Day, and Children's Day.
And that's why I was super excited to get on your show. Aside from the fact that you guys are both rock stars in Russia, is your desire to actually emphasize the importance of a multipolar world. Multipolar world does not just mean geography, right? It also means championing the youth, championing not just women, but also championing the youth. Whenever we are in digital economy and fintech conferences, we say majority of the world's population and the global majority are under 30 years old, and yet none of us are under 30, right? Most of us are not under 30. So when we create a multipolar world, it's not just to diversify it geographically, but also in terms of basis of power, right? How do we empower not just women, but also, for example, those in agriculture or the youth, right? Or even gamers. I'll tell you something, guys. There is a huge freelancing, or what we term gigster economy in the global majority. So these are informally employed, or they have their own gigs, right? They're freelancers. They could be doctors, they could be students. And yet, since many of them work cross-border and receive payments in crypto, many of the banks and financial institutions actually do not recognize them. They do not have healthcare services. They do not have bank accounts. When they try to travel, for example, they're not given visas because embassies do not recognize their newfound wealth, which is probably in crypto. So, despite the awards, of course, we're very grateful. What it really tells us is there's so much work that has yet to be done, or even started in certain instances. So it's not just about women advocacy. By the way, special shout out on March 11. I would love to invite Anna to be part of our Women in Digital Economies webinar. It's not just about women talking about themselves, but rather talking about their projects and seeing how we can gain global support, right? So it's about women, it's about the youth, it's about the gamers, right?
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Yes, how do we recognize, for example, gamers as actual contributors to the digital economy, right? Kazan, for one, I hope you don't think that Kazan is my favorite Russian state.
But it's very proactive.
Kazan
We know it.
They are super. So special shout out to the Ministry of Digital in Kazan, especially Minister Irat. But they hosted the Games of the Future, which is all about phygital games, right? The bringing together of the digital and the physical. So I think that's what we'd like to continue doing in IDEA, would be to advocate the under-advocated, but most impactful digital economy leaders in the global majority.
Sounds impressive. Indeed, very impressive. All right, Christina, unfortunately, we are reaching
Yes, our time is over.
the end of the podcast, but it was very interesting discussion, and I'm really sure that we have a lot of topics left behind which we need to discuss in nearby future.
Yes, very fascinating conversation. Thank you very, very much, and hope to see you again in our studio, Christina.
And maybe in person,
Yes.
when you're in
Absolutely.
Russia next time.
Hopefully, inshallah. Большое спасибо, Anna, Yuri. Я люблю тебя, Москва.
Thank you very much. We love you too.
Спасибо. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Goodbye.
Zvezda Holding presents Dynamic Spectrum Talks. Now.